Hello everyone, I want to talk now about some things you can do after your project is exported and done and you're ready to kind of put it away indefinitely, and how you can deal with things like this horrifying thing called missing proxy, or missing whatever, which is also referred to sometimes as media offline. You've Final Cut can't figure out where this file is, so it can't show it to you. Now, one thing I want to show you real quick before we get into sorting out um, how you deal with your project after you're done with it is when you're exporting your project. I neglected to mention this. One thing that's important to do is to verify that you are not viewing the proxy version of your timeline. If you made proxy files and you've been editing with proxy files, if you go to view, you can see we have proxy versus optimized. When you go to export, you need to switch this to optimized. Otherwise, you'll be working with the proxy when you export, which is a low quality stand-in video, which the whole reason we created is so that our computer will run better when we're playing back our projects. It's not ideal. So we don't want to do that. We want to go to optimized on our view, look at it that way, and then we're looking at all our optimized clips too. And then when we go to export a master file, we will have here it says source Apple ProRes 422. That's our original video quality. If I go here and switch this back to proxy, and then go to export a master file, go to settings again, source Apple ProRes 422 proxy. So not so good. So I neglected to mention that when I was talking about export, so I want to make sure that everybody is aware of that if you happen to be working with proxy files. If you're not doing that, if you're having no trouble playing back your video in the original format or the optimized format, whatever you've been bringing it in as, then you're good. Okay, so you finished with your project, and here's the problem. It's taken up a lot of space, and it's actually taken up a lot more space than it needs to. So how can we basically slim this thing down so if we go put it on a hard drive and put it on a shelf somewhere, it doesn't take up so much space and we don't have to have so many hard drives for so much stuff? Well, there's a couple of ways that you can kind of trim your project down before you go and put it to bed for a while. One of them is you can select the library. You can actually just select an individual project, whatever it happens to be. But if you want to do everything, you can select the library and go to File, Delete Generated Library Files. So this means delete things that Final Cut X has created for you. And since Final Cut has created it for you, it can do it again for you if it needs to. Okay? So this is coming straight out of the software. We're not deleting anything that any original media that we brought in or anything like that. We're just deleting this stuff that has been created in the process of editing in Final Cut X. And so the beauty of this is that we can always get this stuff back later if we needed to. We can regenerate it. It'll just take time. So what you're sacrificing here is if you ever decide to open up this project again and work in it, it might take some time for Final Cut X to regenerate these things. So here are our three main options. We have delete render files. So if we added any effects or did anything fancy to our video, Final Cut X created render files, which are like a whole other version of that video clip. So we can delete those, and we can say unused only. So any effects that renders that we didn't actually use in our project, we can delete, or we can delete them all. And I would say probably get away with just deleting them all. Again, it kind of depends on how much time you want Final Cut to have to take to rebuild this if you want to open it later. Then you can delete optimized media. So those are the files that Final Cut has created from your original clips that are designed to work optimally in Final Cut X. And delete proxy media, which are the low quality clips that Final Cut created to make it easier for you to play back your videos and whatnot easily. So if you want to really slim things down, you can delete all of this stuff, and that, well, it kind of depend on your project how much it will slim it down. But this is one thing that you can do to get rid of a lot of stuff. And again, you can select the library and do it for everything in that library. You can select it just for an event, or you can select an individual project. and go in and delete the generated project files for that. Okay, so that's one way that you can kind of slim things down to give yourself some more space. Let's talk a minute here about relinking media. Anytime you got something like this is a project that's showing me that we're missing some files from it. Or if I go into an individual clip here, let's see. I'm going to go to proxy and see what goes offline here. Okay, the Lambo drive. So what it's telling me here is we have a missing proxy. And the reason it's missing is because I don't think I ever created it. We see this, since I never created it, when I go into view and choose look at the proxy version of all of my clips. It says missing, don't have it. So I could generate a proxy for it. Proxies are not, they're something you can recreate. So if you're missing proxies, it's not the end of the world. And maybe you never created them in the first place and you just somehow accidentally got into proxy view. And if you go back to optimized or original, it will come back. But as sort of as an example, because I want to show you what these clips look like when they are missing their links, this is what you'll find, and you can do this. It's unfortunately somewhat easy to do this. If you're when you're importing media into Final Cut X, if you select the leave files in place, that means that they're not coming into Final Cut X's happy little library. They're being left, and they could be anywhere. They could still be on an SD card. They could be on a hard drive for the computer you're working on right now, and you move to another computer, and it's not there. So kind of the downside of leave files in place is that Final Cut doesn't bring them into its little library to keep track of it. So if you do that, and then you go and rename those clips, or you move them, or you disconnect that SD card or something, you can get this. And if you know where those clips are, you're okay. We can get around this. If you have no idea where those clips have gone, and they're not on your computer, and they're not on anything connected to your computer that you're aware of, then you have some problems that are going to be tricky to fix. So to get this back, we can go to File, Relink Files, and we could have multiple selected if we wanted to. And we can choose just what's missing, and the original file for this is not missing, it's the proxy. So that's why when I hit missing, it says, nope, I know where it is. This is not a big deal. But if I choose all, now it shows me what the file name is for this. It doesn't show me what the name I changed it to. It says this is what it looked like, you know, on the hard drive when I brought it in. And then you can manually go and hit locate selected and navigate toward it to it and select it. And then if you get the right match, it'll show you that it's matched here, and you can hit relink. So this is a terrifying thing to have happen. Again, not necessarily missing proxy. This is no big deal. But when you're missing the original footage, that's a problem. And so you can use relink to try and find it again. But I would suggest some things you can do to avoid this in the first place is keep all of your media in the same place, whether it's an external drive or, you know, maybe you're working off your computer's hard drive. But ideally it's an external drive that's safe, that's not going to get knocked off of the counter or stolen or anything like that, something you're being careful with. And just keep everything there, and that will help you with that a lot. And don't go in and, you know, potentially like rename clips in the hard drives. That's kind of a mess too. So once you've brought stuff into Final Cut, it's great to just leave those original files alone. You can go and organize them here in Final Cut X all you want. And then another thing is just to be careful about bringing in stuff from a whole bunch of different sources. Maybe you got 3 or 4 external drives selected, and you're bringing them into Final Cut, but you're leaving them in place or something. And there are some times where this just happens, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. I've been in this situation plenty of times where I start a project on one drive, and then it just takes up so much space that I have to move on to another drive. And that's an area where you can really get yourself in trouble, where you've got media spread out over a couple of different drives, and if one of them dies or whatever, you can lose media that way. So it's great if you can have plenty of space on a hard drive, or even start a brand new external hard drive if you can, or clear old stuff off of it and start fresh with a new project. So it's kind of down the lines of what I want to talk about next, which is archiving your project. So basically we never want to delete stuff forever. I don't know, unless you're trying to cover up something. you want to be able to go back to that project later. You never know, there might be footage from it that you want to use for another project. Maybe you are applying for a job and suddenly you need this footage for your resume reel or something you never thought you needed again. So it's really good to hold on to this stuff. And there are some pretty easy ways to do that. First of all, if we go and locate the library file, let's see if I can find where I put this thing. Let's go to the library here and choose Reveal in Finder. That's a faster way to do it. And so here's the library file. We can actually just go ahead and drag this whole library to another hard drive. So for example, I have hard drives that I use for active projects and hard drives I use for storing projects. And the active projects, they tend to be smaller, more rugged external drives, and the archive projects are the bigger ones, and these hard drives need to be plugged in for power and that kind of thing. So what I can do, or heck, you could use Google Drive if you want to get crazy. You grab the library that you're finished working on and drag that to another device, either another external hard drive or cloud storage if you have the connection, the bandwidth to make that work. And you can see this is about 15 gigabytes, so this is a fairly small project that would take up quite a bit of space. So that's why I say cloud drives might be a little tricky for how big these are, but it does depend on your internet connection. And then once you've done that, what you can do is consolidate all of your media to that particular place. And consolidate is I'm trying to think if I've heard it in other editors, but it's a fairly common term, and it means, whatever editor you're using, hey, go and find all of the clips that are outside of the library and copy them over into it. All right, and we can do that by clicking on the library and going File, Consolidate Library Files. And this is a good thing just to double check. Even if you've been moving everything, you think you've done everything right, you never know. Sometimes files kind of sneak out, get away from you a little bit. And so if you consolidate library files, that means that everything that's connected to this library that is not already saved within the library is going to get moved into it, okay? Copied into it. Not moved is technically the wrong term. It's not going to move those files from wherever they are. It's going to make a copy. So if we move that library file onto our backup, our archive drive, and then we consolidate everything to it, then we know that everything's going to be happy there. And when we go to consolidate, we can choose, do we also want to include optimized media? Do we also want to include proxy media? And again, these are things that Final Cut can create again for you. That's why it's giving you this option. It's saying, you want to move these, or you just want me to make them again if you ever decide to. And so I would say you don't really have to worry about that, but it's your call. And then you can hit OK, and it will move all those files over for you. Then what I would recommend is that you disconnect, any drives that are still connected to, that still might have clips on these, and then open up the project using the archived library that you created. Double click that, open it up, and then see, is anything going online? Are you seeing any of these little alert signs saying I'm missing something, or at least alert signs you weren't seeing before? If you see a whole bunch of those, it could mean something went wrong. And then if you're really happy that you're totally content that everything is good there, then you could go and delete the original library from your hard drive, and then know that you have a decent backup, although that is still a terrifying thing to do. So that's how you can archive your project. It'll take a while, but it's definitely a good thing to do so that you can come back to it later if you decide you want to resurrect it or reuse some of the footage from it for some reason. So that is a pretty simple way to archive. Most editors have some kind of process for this that ranges from simple to more complex, but Final Cut is really pretty good. Not too hard to figure that out. So hope that all made sense, and yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.